Sydney, the heart of Australia, a growing centre of international finance, used to be a colonial town. Within its colourful past, every monument and building have a story. In 1981, with the aspiration of being a metropolis, and to celebrate 200th European settlement in Sydney, the Strand Arcade was constructed. The building is adjoining the iconic landmark, Sydney Tower, linking George Street and Pitt Street. Its classic revival style was inspired by arcade architecture originated in 19th century Paris. The Strand was a transition from street-level shopping to department store, a reflection of shift from modernity to post-modernity. A world in miniature.
The arcade, in architectural terms, is just basically a series of connected arches, often describing a passageway, whether interior or often you find just exterior to the building, or connecting buildings. It's been around for a long time. It has function in churches, for instance, but in the modern sense of the term, it comes to describe public spaces, but sheltered public spaces, which people can come and gather, but specifically, in the modern sense of the term, to shop.
The arcade, as an architectural type, was invented in industrial age. Industrialization heralded the start of modernity system. It transformed scientific knowledge into technology. The architect, John Spencer, applied new tactics in the building, that is, iron construction. Cast iron, as a new building material emerging during the Industrial Revolution, nurtured the unique frame of the building. In 1976, a great fire devastated the arcade and collapsed the facade, but the iron-laced balconies and roof support remained intact for its full length. It is industrialization that benefits the prevention of the building and makes it such an exquisite sight to visit.
Especially with iron and steel, the frames of buildings and the frames of rooms or whatever happen to be could be built more quickly, much more lightly, and hence the strength as well. So there's a lot of experimentation with these new materials, and so bridges were built in these materials, new buildings and so on. Industrial Revolution, really though, it's not about just the fact of those materials, it's the extent of them. So you can manufacture so much more. That's the real difference between Industrial Revolution and what went before, is scale.
During the period of Industrial Revolution, machine replaced manual labor, social class reshuffled, hierarchy blurred. Human being was experiencing something unprecedented. That's when modernity spills over into every aspect of our life. The use of electric light in the arcade was innovative yet elegant. Although electricity was more costly than gas in the early days, it still was widely accepted by the public. To reduce glare, tinted glass was applied on the roof. This makes the arcade one of the first buildings designed with Australia's climate in mind. This bold use of new material, this integration of technology and architectural artistics, all distinguish the Strand Arcade from old marketplace and create a precise environment for shop. Berman describes modernity as a paradoxical unity, a unity of disunity. Its disintegration and renewal not only brings us progress and development, but also contradiction and ambiguity. Modern automation manufacturer allows the renovation of the Strand by duplicating its original design from cement to base. It also significantly enhances efficiency and productivity, therefore paved the way for consumer fetishism culture.
Modernism is linked to mass production. So as mass production increased, so too did the availability of materials, and the price of products decreased and the abundance of products increased. And that meant that people were able to buy things for less hours of work and for a cheaper price. So people, instead of making things themselves and doing things themselves, began to consume more and more. And this laid the way for what has become a culture of mass consumption.
During the early opening, affluent men and women were the primary customers of the Strand Arcade, as they are wealthy enough to buy luxurious and amuse in the lavish restaurant. However, for the past decades, as capitalist society developed, promenading, shopping, entertaining is no longer a privilege for bourgeoisie. Instead of trade to survive, people became to buy things for self-development and self-satisfaction. Modern society separates good from its use value. Indeed, it gives signifiers to these objects. Therefore, objects become commodities. They were given values and meanings. They were packed and displayed in an artistic way. They became signs that controlled the market. Baudrillard believes that affluence is merely the accumulation of signs of happiness. So the Strand Arcade is a world of display of signs, where modern people step into a symbolic consumption epoch. By the influence of this late capitalism phenomenon, great ideology changes have taken place. Postmodernism is, in Lyotard's word, an incredulity toward meta-narratives. It is a rejection of modernism. Postmodern men and women are characterized by their distrust of authority, their doubts of progress, and their openness of the future.
Many people would say that postmodernism has been the great connector across the globe. So in times gone by, we weren't able to travel, we weren't able to know about other cultures, we weren't able to as easily live with other people from other parts of the world. So postmodernism is linked to globalization and the sharing of cultural ideas and a sense that we all live on one globe and we are part of the same species, the human species, and we all share our resources.
The Strand Arcade have attracted a mass of overseas tourists in recent years. People now willing to expose to different cultures via travel as a consequence of globalization. Giddens described that globalization is an intensification of worldwide social relations which link distant localities in such a way that local happenings are shaped by events occurring many miles away and vice versa. Having a stroll in this Victorian-style building, taste a cuisine from Italian restaurant, try on an oriental design dress that is on fashion trend. That's exactly what globalization feels like. Gilpin says, globalization is the integration of the world economy. We are now living in an environment where the global economy is tightly linked, where capitalists have to make objects appealing to make business afloat. The rapid globalization brings new opportunities and challenges to human beings. It also profoundly influences art and fashion. Just as the world moves, trends come and go. Molly describes postmodernism as a period where everything is forgotten or thrown away almost immediately, only to reappear a little later as nostalgia or ritual chic. These crafting and bespoke shops, decorating with old-fashioned timber and tools, are the longing for the pre-modern life and the homage to the classic. These handmade pieces, tailored by hands, are the expression of the conflict between past and present, are the new luxury in our society. While the postmodernism embraces the global circumstances and accelerates the speed in which information travels, it also reinterprets the world with digitalization. Digitalized world is filled with information, where we can now do almost everything with a simple click on the computer. The explosion of information improves the efficiency of communication and payment. It also gives birth to the mass media era.
If you listen very carefully, I'll tell you a tale of coffee and tea and E.H. Harris and Company. In 1883,
Harris Coffee and Tea was one of the earliest settled shops in the Strand Arcade. In 1960, Harris Coffee made a television commercial called Clipper to promote their product. This short sequence of moving images, editing with montage techniques, are floating about in a hyperreal space, implies a postmodern state of mind.
They opened shop in Sydney Strand, and soon the word passed through the land that E.H. Harris and Company sold quality coffee and tea. Now times have changed and Sydney swings. It's a different kind of ship that brings cargoes for Harris across the sea, but there's never been a change in the quality. Since 1883, E.H. Harris and Company for quality coffee and tea. Harris Coffee and Tea. Quality coffee and tea. Harris Coffee and Tea.
In modern society, we're used to having images around us, and we're used to quite a fast-paced society. So we prefer things that are moving, that are animated. So I think digitalization is opening up new perspectives on advertisements, on society, on ways of seeing.
Rizzo argues that advertising has aided and exploited commodity fetishism by suggesting that commodities have magical properties. That is, that buy a product will increase the consumer's social status or attractiveness. Postmodern manufacturers are driven by profit. They use images to simulate human emotion, therefore blurring the boundary between real and virtual world.
Mischief is the new impulse fragrance. It's making mischief all over town.
A lot of people talk about digitalization and its effect on communication, but it also affects the way people perceive things and see things. And in digitalization, one of the ways of seeing is that we now see multiple copies of copies of copies. So are we ever seeing the original is something that we never know anymore.
Postmodern world is full of fantasy and imagination. But living in such a world, we almost lost our ego and identity. We almost wipe away our root and history. Just like Wilde once wrote, nowadays people know the price of everything and the value of nothing.